Just waiting for Reverend Aaron Long to show up. We'll only be about 35 minutes today. Here he is.
Hey, Donald.
Hey, Aaron, sorry I was a minute or two late there.
Ain't no problem. I got to get off about 10:40.
Okay.
I'm still going to laugh about you wearing your monk's robe.
My what robe?
Your monk robe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's comfortable. I got to find my purple shirt and get back in the act. Just to irritate.
Well, I wanted to ask, how was the response to our video on Tuesday?
Uh, I didn't see any comments in the comment section. Nobody wrote anything about it. Why, did you hear anything?
Well,
Now, I see that Punk McCann is poking his head around on some old post and calling me or whatever. Is Punk McCann still around?
yeah, he did take a break for a while, but he's back.
Too bad.
But no, it's what bothers me about this not being more widely viewed is the fact that while I think our work on sola scriptura is of utmost importance, this is a problem that directly affects the churches right now.
Which problem is that?
Well, the Aimee Byrd, the revoice, all of this.
Yeah.
And it's not that it is more important, it is that it is more toxic. It is the direct result of the abandonment of the solas, but it is a manifestation that if the fire isn't put out, can consume the church.
As for Aimee Byrd, I went back on Orthodox. Oh, by the way, we got about 75 or 80 hits
Mm-hmm.
in my analytics section, which is more than I usually get with my theological posts. So it generated interest. I went to Orthodox Presbyterian Church and typed in Aimee Byrd,
Mm-hmm.
and I found a statement by the General Assembly or General Convention, General Assembly of 2022, in which they officially apologized for the vile and brutal language that Mark Spangler used against Aimee Byrd. They didn't agree with Byrd's views, but they wanted to apologize, and they corrected and disciplined the Southeast Presbytery for failure to correct Mark Spangler. So that occurred on, Geneva Commons, and that whole group no longer exists.
But see, what bothers me about that is it goes back to my steers and queers theory. He was speaking the truth. Why should you apologize for speaking the truth?
Um, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the language, whether it was excessive or I don't know what he said. So
No, but see, that's my point. It could be said that his language was a little harsh, but what he was saying was truth. The fact that they apologize shows they're a bunch of steers and queers. They are basically the men that made that statement are no more than they're toxically feminine. They're more worried about people's feelings than the truth, and that ultimately was what led to the downfall of the main line. When you become so concerned about the way you present something above and beyond the content of what you are saying, you have already lost the battle.
They also have some book reviews, which I've not read, on the OPC website. So I'm not done yet. I have three more of her books coming in. And I just finished her fourth book called The Sexual Reformation. And you know, it's like a millstone being dropped overboard. It just sinks to the bottom. It's a nothing burger, total zero. And
But Don,
I don't know what's restoring the dignity of a woman and a man in the church comes out two or three, four times, but the rest is all long talking and babble gaffing.
but Donald, that's what they do. And I just got out my copy of
Oh,
Saul Alinsky's.
by the way, I ordered Saul Alinsky's rules, and then a second book. I forget the guy's name. How to defeat Saul Alinsky's
I
rules.
laugh because I just ordered that same book. It's supposed
Okay.
to be coming in today, but I got my copy of Saul Alinsky back out, and I started last night going through it to refresh myself. Because the thing is that is what lies behind what's going on. And the common denominator between both Revoice and Aimee Byrd and all of this is the fact that it is the elevation of toxic femininity over rationality. The reason why you can say it's a nothing burger and you can push it off is it goes directly to your training and your military background. You were trained as a forensic theologian.
Westminster.
Right. And
Paper.
Donald, I'm not criticizing, I'm saying your mind was shaped and formed to where if something does not contain a solid, logical, theological formulation, you're automatically going to dismiss
and
your.
and not just dismiss it. No, no, no. That's not Westminsterianism. Westminsterianism does, like you said, detects the errors, but it stands up to, against, and answers those errors.
Okay, and here is where the problem.
That's the detective and prosecutor and jury and judge.
And here is where the problem comes in. You are used to sword fighting. They're bringing a shotgun because what they're doing is they are not fighting you on what would be a fair battlefield. Due to the influence of the Second Great Awakening, the charismatic movement, the feminization of Western society since the two world wars, what we have are feelings that have overrode any form of masculine logical thought. So what you're seeing is the nothing burger is how they conquer everything.
Yeah, I mean you're reading along and you're going, yeah, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, okay. And then you start asking, well, what's the main point here? She goes on for 200 pages. It's a complete empty. The title, I'm not even sure what her theme is. The title says Sexual Reformation, recovering the dignity of manhood and womanhood, but she never answers what it's to be restored to. There's always this hidden agenda of, something against hyper machismo and hyper on the male and hyper submissiveness on the female. She doesn't come out and say it. It's like a hidden agenda. It's total nothing burger.
All right, Donald, let me try to explain this in a different way.
Now, this was written in 2024
Right.
after all of her dust up 2019 to 2022.
But let me explain what's going on around us. Okay. In the time that you were on board ship, okay, when you were isolated in somewhat of a controlled environment.
And it was all men,
Right.
rough guys too.
What
Let me
was,
let me tell you a story about the first day I walked onto a ship. I had been for 4 years with the submariners. I'd done some work with them. Now I'm on a surface ship. My first day, the ship was in port. We were getting ready in 3 or 4 days to sail to the Persian Gulf. Sat down for breakfast. The officers had breakfast, and we were seated according to our rank. The XO was a lieutenant commander, senior lieutenant commander at the head. Next to him was a supply officer, a lieutenant commander. I was down at the bottom because I was a lieutenant. And they apparently had abused the previous chaplain. Well, the number three guy, the supply officer, leans out over the table and yells down my way. Again, first day on ship. And he says, "Hey, chaplain, I really enjoyed effing your wife last night." I was shocked. I leaned back out. What I'm doing is I'm pointing you to the roughness
Mhm.
of military officers. And I leaned back out to him and I said, "How about this, Suppo?" Suppo means supply officer. "How about if you and me go out back on the helo deck and have a fist fight, and we can have the doctor over here." We had a medical doctor. He was sitting right across from me as a lieutenant. "We can have the medical doctor come and be the referee because you're going to need him." Everybody broke out into laughter. They had a chaplain whose cojones hung down to his knees.
Mhm.
But I'm pointing out, you live in that kind of environment. I could tell many more stories like that. And you get toughened up. You're not you still try to be polite to everybody you deal with. But if you're abused and accosted, you have a right to defend yourself. Anyways, I'm amplifying on your point there.
But my thing is while you were there, that is not the nature of what American society has devolved into. Now, we are not as bad as the Europeans, but it is part of the decadence of Western culture that it has become feminized.
Do you
You,
know of any good books along those lines?
I'm doing some research right now to dig some up for you. I actually thought about that before, but what has happened is we have had about 4 or 5 generations of clergy in the local parishes that have drank so deeply from two wells that people have a tendency to think are counter to one another, but they're actually related. That is the well of the Second Great Awakening, which basically throws out academics and logic in favor of emotion, and the well of higher criticism that has a tendency to destroy the original text, to where sermons have ceased to be sermons and have become stories. The pastor has become a social worker, has become an effeminate little fop dancing around in his dress up front. It's manifested completely in contemporary worship, where you see the pastor, or in the televangelist, where they all look gay to me, to where they're dressed in the latest fashions and they give these TED talks, and it's all about making people feel good instead of actually communicating the gospel or anything with any substance to it. So what you have, the Baptists have not helped out in this manner either, because the hellfire and brimstone preaching, which I'm a big fan of, at the same time is based in emotional response rather than in theological consideration. You've gotten congregations that do not respond to actual Christianity. They respond to emotionalism. The church has become effeminized. And in the rise of that, what you've seen is men fleeing the church. So what you end up having are churches run by women with, if they even have a male pastor, the male pastor is so soft-spoken and so effeminate. You've seen the reactions people give me, because you know I'll fire on all cylinders no matter what, but I'm generally hated by other clergy. I was called a toxic man when I was in seminary. I was called the problem with the church because what they are doing in their effeminization is they're basing religion on emotionalism. So when you come at them with this forensic theological model, what is happening is they automatically dismiss it. It doesn't matter if you have answered all their questions because they're going to reject whatever you say because it is not the worldview they are bringing to the table.
Gotcha.
It's almost like you're speaking a foreign language. So your Westminsterian training then becomes a moot point, not because you're wrong, not because you have not addressed the questions, but because they're not going to accept that mentality in the first place. They're going to say it's hurtful. Look at what the OPC did. The OPC of 50 years ago would have looked at Spangler, they would have analyzed Spangler's arguments, they would have said, you are absolutely correct in your conclusions. We disagree with the way you have addressed them.
I get you.
We may censor you for a time for the way you address them, but we will support you right out the gate because you're right.
Yeah, gotcha. That's my developing position as I investigate it.
He would not have been put on a 2-year ban and all the rest.
Yeah, really.
Huh? Back
Yes.
50 years ago, he'd have got a slap on the wrist to let him know he does not need to use such language from the pulpit.
By the way, J. Gresham Machen, when he was still at Princeton, was one of his first appointments was to polemical theology. There were some objections to him because he was too strong,
Right.
too combative, because he saw the advancing liberalism and he was answering that.
But see, here's the problem. This is the left's tactic. They cannot beat us intellectually. So what they do is they come against us for being hateful. They come against us for being harsh. They are subjectivist by nature because if you're an emotionalist, you are subjective by nature.
So they need a pastoral manual upgraded with the Old Testament.
Right. And it's my response every time they bring this emotional BS to me in the first place. I give them this example. There's a Mexican restaurant about 3 miles down the road named Guadalajara. I absolutely love chili poblanos. So I can have the emotion leaving the office driving down there of happiness and joy because I'm going to get to eat me some stuffed peppers. Now, I'll be happy the whole time I'm eating them, but by the time I get in the car, I'm starting to have regrets because the pain's starting to sit in because my stomach don't handle peppers too good. By the time I get home, I'm praying to the good Lord to take my life away because I think I'm dying. And then
you're passing a wind that's louder than a trumpet.
Right. I can have 15 different emotions in 15 different minutes.
Yeah.
But what do they matter? Feelings ultimately don't matter. But to them, feelings are the very basis for what they deem to be truth because they are subjectivists.
Now, how does Saul Alinsky come back to this Aimee Byrd thing and what's going on?
Okay. We'll run through the Byrd thing. Aimee Byrd
By the way, I think she's got unresolved daddy issues.
Oh, I know she does, but
She mentioned that the divorce between her mother and father when she was 16 was traumatizing for her. And 5 years later, at age 21, in 1997, she got married. And by 2013, she writes her first book, The Housewife Theologian, and then one or two more until this recovering from
Yeah.
the wallpaper book.
All right. Aimee Byrd took a page out of Alinsky's playbook. She did not, she is a revolutionary, a vanguardist for the feminist movement within the OPC. And Alinsky talks about the vanguard. And Alinsky talks about the failure of the vanguard during the hippie movement. He said, what happened with the vanguard during the hippie movement is these men came out there with their long hair and they're unwashed, and they appear in their appearance directly against society. Well, they're automatically rejected. Alinsky said, if you're going to truly be the vanguard, you must in your heart be a revolutionary, but in your outward approach look like somebody who is on the inside. So he has said, you don't grow your hair out, you bathe, you dress conservatively. And while you do that, you infiltrate.
Kind of like Obama and the Russia hoax with
Right.
Brennan. You know, they were insiders who looked good, sounded good, but were really working against Trump.
Well, Obama and Hillary Clinton are both disciples of Alinsky.
I think Hillary wrote her bachelor's thesis on Alinsky.
Right.
Taken.
And Obama's mother had met Alinsky.
Okay. Yeah, she was a PhD.
Paul VI was a friend of Alinsky.
Paul VI.
The one that managed the Second Vatican Council.
Okay.
But that's because the bishops of Chicago were all in bed with Alinsky. So were the Episcopalian bishops, but that's neither here nor there. All right. Anyway, Alinsky says you infiltrate.
I'm wondering if she was not consciously doing that or consciously doing it. I'm not sure.
Okay.
He never mentions Alinsky at all.
No, she wouldn't, because the name would automatically send up red flags.
Yeah.
It would automatically get her cut off. All right. You get in, you're acceptable. Then you start to find out who is the greatest enemy that you have inside. What you do is you figure out a way to provoke them into attacking you. After they attack you, you play the victim card.
Sure.
Once you play the victim card, behind the scenes, you tear them down, but in public, you rally support for your side.
Gotcha.
And what you do is you slowly, through this process, eliminate anyone who would stand against you until you eventually take control of the scenario.
There's some parallels here to what Fenwick did.
It's because Fenwick was always an agent from the Church of England that was placed into the FEC, either to convert it or to destroy it. Because
he did say that it's either going to change or what it was before, it should end. There's a witness to that statement. He's definitely there to change it into his image, which was broad ecumenism to include Anglo-Catholics and the Orthodox, and away from the Reformed heritage.
Because at the point in time that the Church of England sent him in, the Free Church of England was gaining ground. They had to be neutered before they became a threat to the Church of England. you see this in politics. It's exactly how the left has become what it is. Because if you'll remember, when I was growing up, the South had already flipped, don't get me wrong, but there were still what they call blue dog Democrats. They were Democrats because they were for the working class, but as far as their moral and other convictions, they were solidly conservative. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Well, the hard left could not tolerate the blue dog Democrats. So what they did is they took over the machinery of the party. And they isolated and attacked and isolated and attacked and isolated and attacked until they purged out all of its vanguardism. It is straight up Marxist vanguardism, only it is adapted from military function to social function.
So infiltrate, attack
Isolate,
leader, play the victim card, gather support.
infiltrate, gather information, identify the enemies, isolate them, and destroy them.
You know, Obama was a student of those tactics, by the way.
Right.
And explicitly so.
Now, go back to what you read about the OPC. The most solid theological presbytery of the OPC, I would argue, was the Southeastern Presbytery. It would have been what would have been the descendants of Dabney. Because even up north, there were those that had started to accept higher criticism. It had to have even been percolating around when you were in seminary, to where you still had the advantage of some people that were the old guard, but the new ones coming in were already starting to drift. Otherwise, Sproul, I mean, look at Sproul. Sproul on a level disconnected himself in a lot of ways. I would argue if you read Sproul, he's not going to come out and say it because it just wasn't who he was. But I find it interesting that the church in Florida, as long as he was alive, was an independent congregation. I don't know if it still is.
No, it's not. It's PCA. But he was still in the PCA presbytery there in Orlando. But all the PCA churches, he said this to me, to my ears, were all doing the contemporary worship thing, and he didn't want to be a part of that.
Right. He was somewhat disconnected. And see, the contemporary worship thing, it opens the door for all of this. Because if you look at the liturgies of a contemporary worship service, it is not actually traditional Reformed worship. It is revivalism imported in. I've said this about the Baptists. The biggest problem with modern Baptists is the fact that it's not even their views on baptism. It's the fact that they imported a revival service into their Sunday morning worship service.
Yeah.
And when you do that,
40 minutes of this.
Right. I'm not even complaining about a revival service. I can see at certain points maybe where it would be useful, but Sunday morning should never be that sort of service. Sunday morning needs a solid biblical liturgy, because Sunday morning is yesterday morning, we were talking about the two most important things the church needs to do is to have solid catechesis. Well, actually three things: solid catechesis, solid biblical liturgy, solid biblical preaching, because it is from those three things that the people are formed. It's those three things that form the worldview. A revivalistic service does not form worldview. It is more of an evangelistic tactic. So we wonder why the churches are no longer Christian. It's because the churches functionally gave up their three core purposes of forming the people. It has become an emotional garbage can. And then you get these vanguardists that slip in, and they are able to dismantle the system because the system itself has already rejected truth in favor of emotion. The system has gone from being objective to being subjective. Higher criticism is not objective, it is subjective.
Very much so.
And it is this.
Very, very, very much so.
All right, look at the OPC and the PCA in their embrace of the critical text of the New Testament. When you embrace the critical text, you have already given ground, and it's why Beakey never has. When you embrace the critical text, you have already given ground on objectivity, because the decisions made in the creation of the cut and paste critical text of the New Testament were subjective decisions made by a certain group of scholars.
Yeah, that's a whole subject I've not really researched.
But I mean,
I take your point.
All of this, whether it be Revoice and them trying to get the acceptance of homosexuals, or whether it be Aimee Byrd and them wanting to get the acceptance of women's ordination, all of it revolves around the idea that we are going to reject objective truth and embrace a form of postmodern ideology within the church based off of feeling, which
And,
is,
bringing that back to Aimee Byrd, because like I mentioned last time, she's constantly recycling back to herself and her feelings.
right,
Repeatedly.
because her locus of authority
It's herself.
is her, not just herself, her locus of authority is her emotional state.
Yeah.
Her locus of authority is not even herself as an objective individual. Her locus of authority is her emotional state. It is, modern society has embraced the worst elements of both the masculine and the feminine. The worst aspects of the feminine are hysteria, i.e., being based out of an emotional state.
Oh,
and
Aimee does militate against that as a stereotype, hysteria for women, and she draws out, of course, the origin of the word from uterus, hysteria. She didn't like that, but
she doesn't like it because it's what she is.
what do you think it says about her husband?
Well, her husband's a cuck. He's a steer. Otherwise, he'd have called her down.
Well, some of the OPC critics said that the husband should tell her to sit down and shut up.
Yes. But, and because of going back to the Alinsky thing, Alinsky embraces feminine warfare. And he actually acknowledges, I don't know if he does in Rules for Radicals, but he does in another book. He acknowledges that feminine warfare is much more useful in a post-World War II context, because feminine warfare revolves around three things: guilt, shame, and rally.
And rally?
Rally. All right.
Oh, railing. Okay.
Rally. R-A-L-L-Y. All right. In a pre-modern sense, men could hold control because men controlled physical violence. Men could go off to war. Men had to do the heavy lifting. Before modernism hit in the Industrial Revolution, Men were in control because you needed a man's physical strength to be able to do these things. Women have by nature developed, whether God created them this way or they developed this way, a way of asserting control when they cannot physically control a scenario. The first is through guilt. They learn to be able to make themselves look like a victim. The second is through shame, where they shame people for their behaviors. And the third is through rallying, where they rally together the other women to be able to control the men through the sexual urge. Guilt, shame, and rally in a strange way. And this is a movie you would have never seen because it's just not a Donald movie. There was a movie that came out in the early 2000s with Lindsay Lohan called Mean Girls. And in that movie, which is a teenage girl movie, I know, but in the movie, you see these tactics that were developed in pre-modern societies for women to be able to control, have a semblance of control within their society that are used. You see it in the Bible. Read the book of Esther. How did Esther get her way? She could not use physical violence against the king. She could not use physical violence against Haman. What she did is she guilted the king for allowing Haman to build the scaffolding and threaten to kill the Jews. She used shame and she rallied people. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It is a feminine tactic. Look at what Aimee Byrd is doing. She guilts people, she shames people, and she tries to rally people with an emotional call.
But she really does fail.
It's the
I know, I
fact.
know, I know what you're saying on the 3 points. I don't know. She's failed with me. I still got 3 more books to go through.
And I knew she was going to fail with you, Donald, but that is because you're coming at it logically and objectively.
Yeah.
You are not her audience. She would shunt you off as being a relic of the past. We do not live in that world anymore, she would say.
She would call me a reformed elitist. She brings
Right.
like it's wrong. And she does say that a number of times, over and over, that we do want to appreciate doctrine, but that's right doctrine, but that's not everything. She says that many times.
All right. Now, I want you to think about her doing that. What is she doing?
Dismissing doctrine, so you listen to me. A little bit
But
of
she is
mild guilt
also
shaming.
she is also isolating. She is creating an us versus them attitude.
Yes.
Okay. In creating an us versus them attitude, she is saying, I am like you. I live in the real world. We can't always focus on these pie in the sky, by and by ideals. We must live in the real world, and the real world's messy, hence the yellow wallpaper. She is going to say you're an elitist, even though you're not. You are the opposite of elitist, but she's taking another page out of Alinsky's book.
Yeah.
She is isolating, attacking, and rallying against you. Maybe
Yeah.
not you specifically, but
Yeah. Well, listen, it's 10:43. Would you get going?
yeah, I'm sorry, Donald. I didn't mean to run my mouth the whole time.
No, it was good, very helpful, and the work will continue, and God willing, we'll be back Tuesday.
All right, we'll see you then.
Okay, have a good weekend.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.